we often say that historicity is very, very important because it also makes it a political journey. It's not something that has suddenly arrived. An idea takes years, sometimes centuries to actually bear fruition. So let's look at those journeys of women activists, scholars throughout these centuries and how we have come to the moment where we are today. Around 18th, 19th century, when industrialization is happening, what we call today the liberal feminist movement, so the movement which talked about women's right to education, women's right to professions, all of that was also starting. So we have people like, say, Mary Wollstonecraft, etc., writing her famous book, talking about how women need to be included in the education process, etc., etc. Now, a lot of people have said, a lot of feminists, Marxist feminists and socialist feminists have said that what was being talked about at that point of time did not really reflect the lived reality of the working class women, of the women who are working in factories, of the women who were working on subsistence farming. These were issues of elite women in the society. It's not that their issues were not real, but the issue that was facing the working class woman or the peasant woman is not of exclusion from work. It was about ceaseless labor at home, in the farm, and in the factories. However, it is not until mid-19th century when Marxist movements are starting and Marxist feminists are coming in to actually use certain concepts to talk about women and work. So we have people like Rosa Luxemburg, Clara Zetkin, Emma Hiller, and there are many more. They are doing organizing in Europe and in the US, in Americas, on different issues of working women. They're talking about how it's important to have equal wages for women and men, higher wages for everybody. They brought in the 8-hour working day concept. Earlier, people would work for 15 hours. So they talked about, so labor unions started being formed, betterment of working conditions and safety, problems of immigrant workers. So you have all heard about the International Women's Day, right? The International Women's Day is brought about by the struggles of these women workers and the Marxist feminists organizing.
Look for the union labels when you are buying a coat dress or blouse. Remember somewhere our union sewing, our wages going to feed the kids and run the house. We work hard, but who's somewhere?
One of the critiques of the Marxist feminists was that they are focusing especially on that public sphere where women are going out to factories to work. They are not looking at the oppression or the marginalization, devaluation, invisibilization and all of this that is happening within the private sphere. By that time, we also have black feminist movements, we have had radical feminist movements that have come up which have focused on issues of sexuality, body, etc. And the socialist feminists are drawing from these different streams to actually talk about the fact that women's oppression, to understand, you have to look at both the home and the world, okay? So inside and outside, private and public. So black feminists in the Americas, they came up, they said that what is the concern of mainstream feminism, let's say suffragette movement or different other kinds of things, वो मेरे लिए apply ही नहीं करता है because I was an erstwhile slave. I face very specific challenges.
Ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arm. I have ploughed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could head me. And ain't I a woman? I could work as much and eat as much as a man when I could get it, and bear the lash as well. And ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children and seen most of all sold to slavery. And when I cried out with my mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me. And ain't I a woman?
A lot of what we call the third world is actually those countries which were colonized. So countries in Africa, countries in Asia, countries in Latin America. A lot of the third world feminists, there are two very important points that they raise. The first point that they raise, and this includes India, the experience of women in the third world is not just because of class or capitalism and patriarchy, it is also because of colonialism. So the relationships between the countries of the world, that also shapes women's experiences in this country. They talked about militarization of wars and how they also impact women's lives and livelihoods. In 1971, actually, the Indian government appointed a committee on the status of women in India. Okay? And this committee submitted a report called Towards Equality, a very, very significant report. And that report showed that women's status has declined across education, employment, health since independence. It's not only that women's status is low, but whatever was there at the time of independence, women are faring worse at the time of 1970. The report came out in 1974. And this was a major eye-opener and a major shock. And that led the Indian government and various feminists to start doing a lot of intervention and work and research around women's position. When you look at the struggles of people around the world, you know, a long series of different movements for more than 100 years, 200 years that women and men and people of the world have been part of. So if you look at jute workers' unions, textile mill workers' unions, you hardly had women. In fact, it took as long as 1970s again, when Ila Bhatt, who recently passed away, for the first time actually organized women workers in textile industries of Ahmedabad, right? You might have heard about SEWA, Self-Employed Women's Association. Questioning of the Indian mainstream movement has also been very critical, and it's been a question on also the autonomous movements. Many of these were urban centric, okay, these were city centric, though they tried to reach out to many kinds of people, but a lot of the autonomous movements, women's movements, were centered around cities, because they were often unfortunately also led by upper caste feminists. Because of their social privilege, they had access to education, exposure, learnings, connections internationally to other feminist movements, which helped them to bring these issues to the country. Then when the Dalit feminist movement started, they said that where are we in your organizations, be it the trade unions or the autonomous movements, where is our representation? Why will you speak for us? Why will we not speak for ourselves? Where are we here? And how are our concerns actually being represented? In many ways, I sometimes think it's sort of remembering our ancestors and also knowing that we are carrying on a legacy, that we are part of a long legacy, and which also gives us hope, because these are times when we sometimes feel very despondent and very sad and very alone. We were able to win some struggles. We win some, we lose some, but the journey goes on.